Here's something that surprises most learners at the C1, C2 level. The reason you can't follow a real English conversation has almost nothing to do with your vocabulary size, and almost everything to do with what happens to words when native speakers actually speak them out loud. Right now, in your head, you probably have a mental dictionary with thousands of words in it. But the moment someone speaks fast, casually, naturally, half of those words seem to disappear, blend together, or turn into sounds you don't even recognize. That's not a vocabulary problem. That's a listening problem. And today, we're going to fix both at the same time. My name is Maya, and this is Natural Word English, the channel where you build advanced vocabulary the way it actually gets used. Inside real conversations, real emotions, real professional situations. Not inside a list you memorize and forget by tomorrow. In the next hour, you're going to walk away with more than 60 pieces of advanced English vocabulary. But, more importantly, you're going to walk away understanding why native speakers sound so fast, so blurred, so impossible to catch, and exactly how to train your ear to catch them anyway. Here's the method, and I want you to understand this before we go any further, because it changes everything about how you'll listen for the rest of this video. When you learn a word alone, disconnected from a sentence, your brain stores it as an isolated fact, like a phone number you'll forget in a week. But when you learn that same word inside a real situation, attached to an emotion, a person, a moment you can picture, your brain stores it completely differently. It becomes part of a memory, and memories don't disappear the way facts do. That's why every single word today comes wrapped inside a scene, a conversation, a real moment you can actually picture yourself in. And on top of that, because this video is about understanding real spoken English, not textbook English, we're also going to work on something most vocabulary lessons ignore completely. The way words actually sound when they're connected together, sped up and blurred by native speakers who aren't slowing down for anyone. Let's start with the world of work, because this is where advanced vocabulary gets tested the most, and where sounding vague or repetitive can actually hold you back. Picture this. You're in a meeting, and your manager asks the team to give an honest opinion about a new project idea. Someone gives a very diplomatic, very careful answer, avoiding anything that might sound negative. Then your colleague speaks up and says exactly what she thinks, clearly, without softening it. That's the difference between being diplomatic and being candid. Candid means being open and honest, even when the truth might be a little uncomfortable. Instead of saying she was very honest, a native speaker might say she was refreshingly candid. Here's the example. Imagine walking into a small, glass-walled meeting room, the smell of fresh coffee in the air, laptops open. Everyone a little tense, because the topic is a project that's falling behind schedule. Someone finally says, "I'll be candid with you. This timeline isn't realistic." Now listen to this short exchange. "Can I be candid with you for a second? Please, I'd rather know the truth. I don't think we'll hit this deadline unless we cut 2 features." That kind of directness, wrapped in politeness, is exactly what candid means. Say it with me, slowly first, then naturally. Candid. Candid. Notice how the D almost disappears into the next word. When spoken quickly, "I'll be candid with you" often sounds like "I'll be candid you," all blended together, no pause between the words at all. Now here's a word that pairs beautifully with candid, but means something slightly different. Blunt. Where candid is honest but still respectful, blunt is honest without much softness at all, sometimes even a little harsh. If your friend asks, "Does this presentation look ready?" and you say, "No, it's a mess, start over," that's blunt. It's true, but there's no cushioning. Native speakers often say things like, "Don't take this the wrong way, but I'm going to be blunt." Picture a small office later in the evening, just 2 coworkers left, one exhausted from rewriting a report 5 times. She asks her friend, "Just tell me straight, is this any good?" And he says, "Honestly? Not yet, it's blunt, but you needed to hear it before your boss did." Shadow that with me. Blunt. Blunt. Notice the stress falls hard and short on that single syllable, unlike candid, which softens slightly on the second syllable. Let's build a longer conversation now, because this is exactly where the previous style of lesson always falls short, giving you 2 lines and moving on. Real conversations are longer than that, so let's practice one properly. Picture 2 coworkers, Sarah and James, standing by the coffee machine before a big client call. Sarah looks nervous, tapping her pen against her notebook. James notices immediately. "James, you seem a little on edge. Everything okay?" Sarah, "Honestly, I'm just worried this pitch isn't strong enough." James, "Can I be candid? I think the numbers are solid, but the opening feels a bit weak." Sarah, "That's blunt but fair. What would you change?" James, "Start with the problem, not the solution. Hook them first." Sarah, "That actually makes sense. Thank you for being straight with me." Now, here's something I want you to try. I'm going to read James's lines again, and this time, when it's Sarah's turn to speak, I want you to pause the video and answer as if you were her in your own words, using what you just learned. Ready? "You seem a little on edge. Everything okay?" Now answer as Sarah would honestly, using a word like candid or worried. Take a moment. Good. Now let's continue and hear how a fluent speaker might respond. "Honestly, I've been rehearsing this pitch all week, and I still feel like something's missing." Let's move to a word that upgrades a very basic idea. Instead of saying someone is not clear or confusing, advanced speakers often say something is ambiguous. Ambiguous means it can be understood in more than one way. And because of that, it creates confusion. Imagine getting an email from your manager that just says, "Let's revisit this next week," with no explanation of what this means. You'd probably think, that's pretty ambiguous. What exactly are we revisiting? Picture yourself sitting at your desk, scrolling through your inbox at the end of a long day, and this vague message pops up. You feel that small flash of confusion, that need to ask a follow-up question just to understand what's actually being asked of you. That feeling, that's the emotional core of ambiguous. Shadow it with me. Ambiguous. Ambiguous. Notice the stress lands on the second syllable, ambigu. And in fast speech, "that's pretty ambiguous" often blurs into "that's pretty ambiguous." The middle syllables almost swallowed together. Now let's connect ambiguous to its opposite, because contrast helps memory stick. The opposite would be something clear, direct, or unequivocal. Unequivocal means leaving absolutely no doubt, completely clear, with no room for multiple interpretations. If your boss says, "We are not moving forward with this project," full stop. That's an unequivocal answer. Picture a tense boardroom scene. Everyone waiting to hear if a merger is happening or not, and the CEO stands up and says just 3 words, "The deal's off." No ambiguity there. That's unequivocal. Shadow it slowly. Unequivocal. Unequivocal. This one is longer, so let's break it down. Unequivocal. Cool. Practice the stress on that third syllable a few times, slowly, then at natural speed. Let's shift now into the world of emotions and personality, because this is where advanced or advanced vocabulary makes the biggest difference in how deeply you can express yourself and how deeply you can understand others. Here's a word that describes someone who notices small details, feelings, and changes that most people miss. Perceptive. If your friend says, "You seem quieter than usual today. Did something happen?" and they're actually right. That's a perceptive observation. Picture sitting across from a close friend at a small restaurant table. You haven't said anything about your bad day, but she looks at you carefully and says, "Something's bothering you, isn't it?" Oh, wait. That quiet moment of being truly seen, that's what perceptive captures. Shadow it. Perceptive. Perceptive. The stress is on the second syllable. Per. C-E-P-tive. And in connected speech, "she's really perceptive" often comes out as "she's really perceptive," with almost no space between really and perceptive. Now here's a related but different word. Empathetic. While perceptive is about noticing, empathetic is about genuinely feeling and understanding someone else's emotions, almost as if you were experiencing them yourself. A perceptive person notices you're upset. An empathetic person actually feels the weight of what you're going through. Imagine calling a close friend after a hard day, expecting a quick, "That sucks, sorry," but instead she stays on the phone for an hour, asking real questions, sitting with you in that difficult feeling, instead of rushing to fix it. That's empathetic. Let's build a mini dialogue around this. Picture a quiet living room, late evening, phone on speaker, one friend curled up on the couch after a stressful week. Friend A: I don't even know why I'm this upset. It's not that big of a deal. Friend B: It's okay to be upset. It sounds like it's been building up for a while. Friend A: Yeah, it has. Thank you for actually listening, instead of just saying, it's fine. Friend B: Of course, I can tell this has really been weighing on you. Notice how friend B never says, calm down, or don't worry about it. That quiet, patient understanding is empathetic in action. Shadow the key line with me. It sounds like it's been building up for a while. Say it slowly first, then try to say it in one smooth breath, the way a native speaker would, without pausing between words. Let's add one more personality word here. Resilient. This describes someone who recovers quickly from difficulty, who doesn't stay broken by setbacks for long. If someone loses their job, feels devastated for a week, and then gets back up, updates their resume, and starts applying again with real energy, that's resilience in action. Picture someone standing outside an office building right after being told, the company is downsizing, phone in hand, stunned for a moment. And then, by that evening, they're already messaging old contacts, already looking forward instead of backward. That quiet strength, that's resilient. Shadow it. Resilient, resilient. 4 syllables. Stress on the second. Resilient. In fast, natural speech, she's incredibly resilient often blends into she's incredibly resilient. Almost no gap between the last 2 words at all. Now here's where I want to teach you something. Most channels skip completely how to actually hear these words when native speakers aren't slowing down for you. This is called connected speech, and it's the real reason fluent conversations sound like a blur to learners. Even learners with strong vocabulary. When native speakers talk quickly, they don't pronounce every word separately. Words melt into each other. Let's take the question. What are you doing today? Spoken slowly, word by word. It sounds exactly like it looks, but spoken naturally and quickly, it often sounds like whatcha doin' today. The what are you collapses into something closer to whatcha, and the stress lands hard on certain syllables while others almost disappear. Listen to the slow version first. What are you doing today? Now the fast, natural version. What you doing today? Try saying both yourself, starting slow, then speeding up until it feels natural in your mouth. Here's another one you'll hear constantly. How are you? Spoken casually often sounds like howya, or even just howya. The R almost completely disappearing into the how before it. Slow version. How are you? Fast version. Howya? This isn't lazy speech. It's just how connected natural English works. And once your ear learns to expect this blending, sentences that used to sound like a wall of noise will start separating into words you actually recognize. Let's practice the technique of shadowing properly here, because I mentioned it, but I want to make sure you actually know how to do it, not just hear the word. Shadowing means listening to a phrase and repeating it back immediately, almost like an echo, matching the rhythm and the speed as closely as you can, not waiting until the sentence finishes to start repeating. It's different from simple repetition because you're training your mouth and your ear to work together in real time, the same way they'll need to during an actual live conversation. Let's try it. I'll say a sentence, and I want you to start repeating it back to me the instant you hear the first word, echoing right behind me. Ready? I think we should be more candid about the delays. Now you try, echoing right on my heels, not waiting for me to finish. Let's return to vocabulary now, moving into the world of technology and communication, because this is one of the most common places advanced English gets used in daily modern life. Here's a word for something that becomes old-fashioned, no longer useful, because something newer has replaced it. Obsolete. If you're still using a flip phone in a world of smartphones, or a company is still relying on paper filing systems, while competitors use cloud software, those things are obsolete. Picture walking into an old office storage room, dusty shelves lined with outdated computers. Nobody uses anymore. Thick manuals for software that stopped being supported years ago. That image, that sense of something left behind by progress, that's obsolete. Shadow it. Obsolete, obsolete. Stress on the last syllable. Obsolete. Native speakers often say that's basically obsolete now, which in fast speech can sound like that's basically obsolete now. The middle syllables almost rush together. Here's a related word describing something that makes a task easier or possible. Facilitate. If a new app helps a remote team communicate better, you could say, this tool facilitates communication across time zones. It's a slightly more formal, more professional way of saying helps or makes possible. Picture a project manager introducing new software to her team, watching relief spread across their faces as scheduling conflicts finally start resolving themselves. She might say, again, this should really facilitate collaboration between the two offices. Shadow it. Facilitate. Facilitate. Facilitate, 4 syllables. Stress on the second. Let's build another longer conversation here, using both technology vocabulary and a role-switching technique. A fee. A bandy fee. Because I want you to actually practice responding, not just listening. Picture 2 coworkers on a video call discussing whether to switch to a new project management tool, Maria. Honestly, our current system feels a bit obsolete compared to what other teams are using. David. I agree. It doesn't facilitate communication the way it should. Everything gets lost in email threads. Maria. Exactly. What if I pitch a switch to the new platform next week? David. I think that's a solid idea. Just be ready. Some people resist change. Now it's your turn. I'm going to read Maria's first line again, and I want you to respond as David would, in your own words, using either obsolescete or facilitate somewhere in your answer. Pause here if you need to. Honestly, our current system feels a bit obsolete compared to what other teams are using. Take a moment to answer. Good. Now here's how a fluent speaker might naturally respond. You're right. And honestly, it's starting to slow the whole team down. Let's move now into a set of commonly confused words, because this is exactly the kind of advanced content that separates real depth from surface-level phrase lists, and this is where a lot of learners quietly lose points in writing and speaking without realizing why. Let's start with affect and effect. Two words that sound almost identical but work completely differently. Affect is almost always a verb, meaning to influence something. Affect is almost always a noun, meaning the result of that influence. The rain affected our plans versus the rain had an effect on our plans. Picture standing at a window, watching heavy rain fall. Right before an outdoor event, you spent months planning, that sinking feeling as you realize the weather will affect everything, and the effect will be a completely different day than you imagined.
Finish.
Shadow both. Affect. Affect. Notice the subtle difference in stress and vowel sound, even though they look so similar on paper. Here's another pair that trips up even advanced learners: imply and infer. To imply means to suggest something indirectly without saying it outright. To infer means to understand or conclude something based on clues, even though it wasn't stated directly. If your friend says, "Well, some people actually finish their work on time," she might be implying that you don't. And you, hearing that, would infer that she's frustrated with you, even though she never said those exact words. Picture a slightly tense dinner table. A comment made a little too casually, and that uncomfortable silence afterward where everyone quietly understands what was really meant. Without anyone saying it directly. That's the emotional space between imply and infer. Shadow them slowly. Imply. Infer. Notice how close these words sound, but how completely different their direction is. One going outward from the speaker, one going inward toward the listener. Let's do one more confused pair before we move forward: continual and continuous. Continual means something happens repeatedly, with breaks in between. Continuous means something happens without any interruption at all, one unbroken stretch. There were continual interruptions during the meeting means it kept happening again and again. The rain was continuous all afternoon means it never stopped, not even for a moment. Picture two completely different scenes. First, a meeting constantly getting interrupted by notifications. People stepping out, phones buzzing, starting and stopping. Again and again. That's continual. Now picture a single, steady downpour outside your window for 6 straight hours, never pausing, never lightening. That's continuous. Shadow both. Continual, continuous. Say them side by side a few times until the difference in rhythm feels natural in your mouth. That's a solid foundation to pause on for this section. In the next part, we're going deeper into synonyms that instantly upgrade your everyday vocabulary. More real conversations. With role-switching practice, a full listening exercise on catching fast speech without translating every word. A sensory self-practice exercise, and the fluency round to lock everything in. Type 1 to continue. 1. Architected comprehensive lesson framework with layered learning components. Architected comprehensive lesson framework with layered learning components. Let's talk about synonyms now, because one of the fastest ways to sound more advanced isn't learning brand new ideas. It's learning richer, more precise words for ideas you already express every day. Take the word happy. Perfectly fine, perfectly correct, but flat. Native speakers reach for something with more texture depending on the exact feeling. If-o-gen. If the happiness is sudden and intense, they might say elated. Picture opening an email and seeing the words, "You got the job," that jump in your chest, that urge to call someone immediately. That's elated, not just happy. Shadow it. Elated, elated. Stress on the second syllable, elated. If the happiness is calm, deep and steady rather than sudden, native speakers often say content. I'm not chasing anything right now. I'm genuinely content with where I am. Picture a quiet Sunday morning, coffee in hand, nothing urgent to do. That settled, peaceful feeling in your chest. That's content. Notice content is also a noun, meaning what's inside something. But here we're using it as an adjective describing a feeling. Shadow it. Content. Content. Stress shifts here too. Content when it means satisfied versus content when it means the material inside. Now let's upgrade sad. If the sadness is heavy and it lingers, native speakers might say despondent. If it's more about disappointment and quiet defeat, they might say dejected. Picture a young employee walking out of an office after being passed over for a promotion for the third time. Shoulders low. Barely responding to a coworker's greeting in the hallway. That's dejected. Shadow it. Dejected. Dejected. Stress on the second syllable. Dejected. Let's upgrade angry too. Instead of just saying angry, native speakers often reach for irate, for intense, sudden anger, or resentful for anger that's been building quietly over time, often because of unfair treatment. Picture someone who's been covering a coworker's tasks for months without recognition, smiling politely in meetings, but underneath, that slow-burning frustration building every single week, that's resentful, not irate. Irate is loud and immediate, like a customer yelling at a service desk over a canceled flight. Resentful is quiet and long-term. Shadow both. Irate, resentful. Notice how different their emotional temperature is, even though both come from the same root to feeling. No, both come from the same root, feeling of anger. Let's build a longer conversation using these emotional upgrades, because this is exactly the kind of practice that turns vocabulary into instinct. Picture two roommates in a small apartment kitchen. One of them just got back from a long, disappointing day at work. Jenna: how did the review go? Alex: honestly, they gave the promotion to someone with half my experience. Jenna: oh no. How are you feeling about it? Alex: dejected, mostly, and a little resentful, if I'm being honest. I've been carrying that team for months. Jenna: that's completely fair. Do you want to talk about it? Or do you want to just be upset for a bit? Alex: honestly, just being upset for a bit sounds perfect right now. Now, pause here and try this. I'll read Jenna's first line again, and I want you to respond as Alex, using one of the emotional words we just learned: dejected, resentful, elated, content, whatever fits the feeling you imagine. How did the review go? Take your moment. Good. Here's how a fluent speaker might respond naturally. Not great. I'm trying not to be too resentful about it, but it's hard. Let's move into the world of travel and everyday encounters now, because advanced vocabulary here helps you describe experiences with much more precision than nice or interesting. Here's a word for a place, person, or experience that stays in your memory because it was so different from anything ordinary. Memorable works, but let's go one level deeper to a word describing something you can't stop thinking about because it fascinated you so completely. Captivating. Picture standing at the edge of a cliff at sunset, somewhere you've never been before, colors spreading across the sky. In a way, photos never quite capture. And that quiet feeling of being completely pulled into the moment, unable to look away, that's captivating. Shadow it. Captivating. Captivating. Stress on the first syllable. Captivating. Here's a related word for a place that feels charming in a slightly old-fashioned, small, cozy way. Quaint. A tiny stone village with narrow cobblestone streets and flower boxes on every window. That's quaint. Picture wandering through a small European town, getting a little lost on purpose, discovering a tiny bakery that's clearly been there for generations, the smell of fresh bread pulling you inside before you even decide to go in. That's the feeling behind quaint. Shadow it. Quaint. Quaint. One syllable, but native speakers often stretch it slightly when they're genuinely charmed. It was just so quaint. Now here's a word for feeling completely lost, confused, and a little overwhelmed in an unfamiliar place. Disoriented. Picture stepping off a long flight into an airport where none of the signs are in a language you understand, your phone battery almost dead, that dizzy, uncertain feeling of not knowing which direction leads anywhere useful. That's disoriented. Shadow it. Disoriented. Disoriented. 5 syllables. Disoriented. Stress on the second syllable. Let's connect this to a listening and pronunciation lesson, because travel English is full of fast, blended speech, especially at airports, train stations, and hotel counters. Take the phrase Do you know where? When spoken quickly and casually, this often blends into something like D. You know where. The do you almost collapsing into a single soft sound. Slow version. Do you know where the nearest station is? Fast version. You know where the nearest station is? Try both yourself, starting slow and deliberate, then letting it blur naturally the way a native speaker would say it without thinking. Here's another extremely common blend. Want to becomes wanna, and going to becomes gonna. These aren't slang or incorrect English. They're just the natural, relaxed pronunciation. Almost every native speaker uses in casual conversation. I'm going to go to the market often sounds like, I'm gonna go to the market. Practice saying that sentence both ways, slow and formal, then fast and natural until the shift feels automatic rather than something you have to think about. Now let's talk about the skill of catching the gist, understanding the main idea of what someone said even when you didn't catch every single word. This is one of the most important shifts a learner can make, because trying to translate and understand every single word in real time is actually what causes native speech to feel impossibly fast. Native speakers themselves don't process every word individually either. They listen for key content words, usually nouns, verbs, and stressed syllables, while smaller connecting words like the, is, to, and of often blur into the background almost unnoticed. When you don't catch a full sentence, instead of panicking or asking someone to repeat everything, you can use small natural responses that keep the conversation flowing while your brain catches up. I see. That makes sense. Right. Right. Got it. Picture standing at a busy coffee counter, someone explaining a complicated new menu item quickly, and you don't catch every detail, but you nod and say, "Oh, I see, that sounds good." And the conversation moves forward naturally. No awkward pause, no need to have understood every single syllable. Let's practice this together. I'll say a slightly longer sentence, somewhat quickly, and instead of trying to catch every word, just listen for the main idea and respond with one of those natural filler responses. Ready? Yeah. So basically, they moved the meeting to Thursday because half the team's traveling for that conference downtown. Now respond, using something like, "Oh, got it," or "that makes sense." Just reacting naturally to the general idea. Not every detail. Let's add one more piece to this listening puzzle. Sentence stress. In natural English, not every word carries equal weight. The words that carry meaning, the important nouns, verbs, and key descriptive words, get stressed, spoken slightly louder and longer, while small grammar words get compressed and quiet. Take the question, "What are you doing today?" A native speaker will usually stress what and doing, almost singing them slightly louder, while are, you, and today flatten out quietly around them. Try saying it with exaggerated stress first. What are you doing today? Then bring it down to a more natural, relaxed rhythm, but keep that same underlying stress pattern. Here's another example. I can't believe she said that. The stress naturally falls on can't, believe, and said, the words carrying the emotional weight of the sentence, while she, that, and I stay quieter and quicker. Practice it slowly first. I can't believe she said that. Then speed it up until it flows naturally, letting the stressed words stand out clearly even as the whole sentence moves quickly. Now, here's a practice exercise. I want you to actually try, not just listen to, because this is where vocabulary stops being something you memorize and starts becoming something you actually use without thinking. I want you to look around wherever you're sitting right now and describe your surroundings out loud, using your senses, and try to use at least one or two of the words we've learned so far today. What can you see around you? Is the lighting warm, or is something about the space quaint, or maybe strangely captivating in some small way you hadn't noticed before? What can you hear? What can you hear? Is there a continuous background hum, like traffic or air conditioning, or is it more continual, like someone's footsteps passing every so often? How do you feel right now? Content after a long day, or maybe a little disoriented if you're somewhere new? Take 30 seconds right now, out loud if you can, and describe your environment using at least one of today's words. This single habit, narrating your surroundings using new vocabulary, is one of the fastest ways to move words from I recognize this to I actually use this without thinking. That's a natural place to pause again. In the final part, we're going into a few more essential confused word pairs, one more extended role-play conversation in a professional setting, a deeper connected speech. Listening drill, the full fluency round, where we rapid-fire review everything you've learned today, and a specific CTA to lock this all into long-term memory. Let's finish with a few more confused word pairs, because these are exactly the kind of small distinctions that native speakers notice instantly, even if they can't always explain the rule themselves. Let's look at economic and economical. Economic relates to the economy as a whole, the big picture, trade, money systems, national growth. Economical means something is efficient with money, cost-effective, a smart way to save. The economic downturn affected small businesses across the country is talking about the whole system. Buying in bulk is a more economical choice, is talking about personal savings. Picture two completely different scenes. First, a news anchor discussing rising interest rates and their effect on the housing market. That's the economic picture. That's the economic picture. Now picture someone standing in a grocery store, comparing the price per unit between a small bag and a large bag of rice, quietly calculating which option saves more money. That's economical thinking. Shadow both. Economic, economical. Notice the extra syllable and the shift in stress. Economical. ik versus ekonomikul. Here's another pair that even advanced speakers sometimes mix up. Sensible and sensitive. Sensible means practical, showing good judgment, making smart decisions. Sensitive means easily affected emotionally or physically reactive to something, like sensitive skin or a sensitive topic. She made the sensible choice to save part of her bonus instead of spending it all. Describes good judgment. He's quite sensitive about comments regarding his work, describes emotional response. Picture a friend giving you calm, practical advice about a financial decision, weighing pros and cons carefully. That's sensible. Now picture bringing up a slightly painful topic at dinner and watching your friend's face change immediately, realizing you touched a nerve you didn't mean to. That's sensitive. Shadow both slowly. Sensible, sensitive. The words look almost identical on paper. But the ending changes everything about the meaning. So it's worth saying them side by side a few times until your mouth and your brain both feel the difference clearly. One more pair before we move into the final stretch. Ensure, and ensure. These three trip up even fairly advanced learners constantly. Assure means to tell someone confidently that something is true, to comfort them, or remove their doubt. Ensure means to make certain something happens, guaranteeing an outcome. Insure means to protect something financially, usually through an insurance policy. I assure you, everything will be fine, is comforting someone. Please ensure the report is finished by Friday, is guaranteeing a result. We need to ensure the new equipment before it arrives. Is about financial protection. Picture a nervous new employee on their first big presentation and their manager leaning over quietly to say, I assure you, you're more prepared than you think. That reassurance, that emotional comfort, that's assure. Now, picture a project manager double-checking every document before a deadline, making absolutely certain nothing is missing. That determined focus on guaranteeing the outcome, that's ensure. Shadow all three together. Assure, ensure, ensure. Slowly at first, then a little faster, noticing how similar they sound, but how completely different their jobs are inside a sentence. Now let's build one more extended conversation, this time set inside a professional situation many of you will actually find yourselves in. Neckhead, a performance review. This is where a huge amount of advanced vocabulary naturally surfaces and where role-switching practice becomes especially valuable. Because these are exact phrases you might genuinely need one day. Picture a small office, blinds half closed against the afternoon sun. A manager and an employee sitting across a desk from each other, a folder of notes between them. The employee is nervous, unsure what kind of feedback is coming. Aglager, overall, I want to be candid with you. Your work this quarter has been solid, but there's room to grow. Employee, I appreciate that. What would you say needs the most improvement? Manager, honestly, communication. Sometimes your updates feel a little ambiguous, and the team ends up needing to follow up for clarity. That's fair. I think I've been trying not to sound too blunt in my emails, so I end up softening things too much. Manager, I understand that instinct, but being more direct, more unequivocal about status and blockers would actually help the team more. Employee, that makes sense. I'll work on being clearer without losing the tact. Manager, that's all I'm asking. You're resilient, you adapt quickly. This is just refinement, not a major issue. Employee, thank you. That's genuinely reassuring to hear. Now, here's your practice moment. I'm going to read the manager's second line again, and I want you to respond as the employee using at least one of today's words, maybe ambiguous, candid, or unsure. Take your time. Honestly, communication. Sometimes your updates feel a little ambiguous, and the team ends up needing to follow up for clarity. Pause and answer now, out loud if you can. Good. Here's a natural, fluent response you might compare yours to. That's helpful feedback. I'll make sure my updates are more direct going forward. Let's do one more role switch, this time flipping the direction, so you practice both sides of a professional exchange, not just responding, but initiating. Picture yourself as the manager. This time, sitting across from a hard-working but slightly disorganized employee. You want to give honest, useful feedback without being harsh. Malik, I know my reports have been a little messy lately. I've just had a lot on my plate. Pause here. Respond as the manager, using words like sensible, ensure, or resilient. Take a moment out loud and respond as the manager would, offering understanding but also a clear expectation. Here's one natural way a fluent speaker might respond. That's understandable. We've all been stretched thin. Let's find a sensible way to lighten your load while still ensuring deadlines are met. Now, let's return to listening training because I want to leave you with a genuinely useful drill you can repeat anytime, not just during this video. Let's take a slightly longer, natural speed sentence and break down exactly what's happening acoustically so you understand the pattern instead of just hearing noise. Here's the sentence. I would have called you, but I didn't want to bother you this late. In natural, fast speech, would have often compresses into something closer to would of, almost sounding like woulda. So the sentence often comes out sounding like, I woulda called you, but I didn't want to bother you this late. Notice two blends happening at once here, would have collapsing into woulda and want to collapsing into wanna. Let's isolate them. Slow. I would have called you. Fast. I woulda called you. Slow. I didn't want to bother you. Fast. I didn't want to bother you. Practice saying the full sentence now, starting deliberately slow, word by word, and then gradually speeding up 3 times in a row until the blended natural version feels automatic in your mouth, not something you're forcing. Here's one more extremely common pattern. The disappearing each sound at the start of unstressed pronouns like him, her, and his in the middle of a sentence. Tell him I said hi often sounds like tell him I said hi. The H almost vanishing because him isn't stressed in that sentence. Give her the folder often sounds like give her the folder. This isn't sloppy speech. It's simply how unstressed function words behave in fast, connected English. Try both examples yourself. First fully pronounced and slow, then blended and fast, letting that H soften and nearly disappear the way a native speaker naturally would. All right, it's time for the fluency round. So let's move quickly now and rapid fire through everything we covered today. No new explanations, just pure repetition to lock these words permanently into your memory. I'll say the word. You repeat it immediately after me, matching my rhythm as closely as you can, remembering that little scene or feeling attached to it as you say it. Ready? Let's go. Candid, blunt, ambiguous, unequivocal, perceptive, empathetic, resilient, obsolete, facilitate. Affect, imply, infer, continual, continuous, elated. Content, dejected, irate, resentful, captivating, quaint, disoriented, economic, economical, sensible, sensitive, assure, ensure. Let's go through them one more time. But this time, instead of just repeating the word alone, I want you to attach a tiny phrase to each one, out loud, using your own words, connecting it to your real life if you can. So when I say candid, don't just repeat candid. Try saying something like, I want to be more candid with my coworkers. When I say resilient, try, I've had to be resilient this year. This second layer, connecting the word to your actual life, is what turns passive recognition into active, usable vocabulary. Take your time on this round. There's no rush. The goal here is depth, not speed. Candid, blunt, ambiguous, unequivocal, perceptive, empathetic, resilient, obsolete, facilitate, affect, imply, infer, continual, continuous, elated, content, dejected, irate, resentful, captivating, quaint, disoriented, economic, economical, sensible, sensitive, assure, ensure. You just moved through more than 60 pieces of advanced C1, C2 vocabulary today, not as an isolated list, but wrapped inside real scenes, real emotions, real professional situations you're genuinely likely to encounter. And more than that, you practiced actually hearing English the way it's really spoken, blended, compressed, fast, instead of the slow, artificially clear version most textbooks give you. That combination, rich vocabulary plus real listening training, is exactly what closes the gap between understanding English in theory and actually following a real, unscripted conversation without translating every single word in your head. Before you go, here's something specific I want you to do. Not just like and subscribe, but something that will genuinely help you remember today's lesson. In the comments, write one sentence, just one, using any word from today candid, resilient, disoriented, whatever felt most useful to you, and try to make it true about your actual life, not just a random example. That act of writing it down, connecting it to something real, will do more for your memory than rewatching this video 5 times. And if you want to keep training this same skill, following real, fast, natural English without losing the thread, come back tomorrow, because we're going to take everything you practice today and apply it to an even longer, even faster real-world conversation, raising the difficulty just enough to keep pushing your ear forward. Keep that momentum going.